Castello was the first garden Cosimo made, but not the last. Whereas that had been a private show of his public power, in 1550, when he was still just 29, work began on a garden that would dwarf Castello, and which was to be a much more public display of his private passions. Whilst work was still underway at Castello, Cosimo started another garden. Now this time it was right in the middle of Florence. It was much bigger, and it was different in a number of ways, not least that it was intended from the outset to house and display his huge collection of sculpture. The traditional seat of Florentine rulers was the Palazzo Vecchio in the centre of the city. But in 1549, Cosimo's wife, Eleonora of Toledo, bought the Pitti Palace just across the river and rebuilt it on an enormous scale. It's not normally open to the public, but I've been given special permission to take the elevated corridor that Cosimo had made in 1564, linking the Pitti Palace to the newly built Uffizi, just so he could walk privately across the river, secure from and unseen by the jostling crowds on the bridge below. Today, the walls are lined with the Medici family's private collection of self-portraits by some of the world's most renowned artists. To just walk along and just see a Rembrandt in old age, that's worth coming here just to see that. At the end of the corridor, a door opens into the most ambitious of all the Medici homes, the Boboli Gardens. Throughout the medieval period, sculpture had been primarily displayed in churches. But now, as Renaissance artists drew inspiration from classical statues that openly relished the human form, sculpture began to be displayed in Florence's gardens and piazzas. One of the most opulent displays of sculpture in the Boboli Gardens is the grotto, designed in 1582 by the Florentine architect Bernardo Buontalenti for Cosimo's son, Francesco. In its heyday, the grotto's marble sculptures and walls of volcanic rock, shells and quartz would have shimmered beneath cascades and jets of water. In the corners are these four sculptures. Now, these are concrete casts, but until the 1920s, they were the originals, and they're by Michelangelo, the slaves. And I remember being taught about these extraordinary sculptures that showed the slave trying to break free from the stone that they're imprisoned in. And then much later, they came here as a gift. Of course, Michelangelo, one of the greatest figures in the history of art and of the Renaissance and of the Medici family. So it's all here in the one place. The Boboli Gardens continued to be made and remade for over 2 centuries, getting ever bigger and grander until eventually it covered 111 acres. Initially, the steep, rocky land behind the palace was levelled to make an open, grassy space flanked by trees where Cosimo could indulge his mania for hunting. Then, some 50 years after his death, his descendants took this modest amphitheatre and enlarged it hugely to accommodate the new theatrical Baroque fashion. There was a mania for performance of any kind, pageants, burlesque, masks, and the bigger the better, because it meant that you had lots of money to spend. They cost a fortune, and they would build volcanoes that exploded and have wild animals. They flooded an area at one time and had a battle with boats. It was a kind of elaborate theatre to entertain your guests, who would sit around and they would take in the space, and the garden became the setting for the most dramatic performance possible. I met the director of the city's museums, Cristina Accidini, to find out more about Boboli's grand masks and pageants. It does seem that there was a big change in style when Cosimo went from Castello to Boboli. What instigated that?
The garden is more and more the setting of public events. That they were recorded, admired, and spoken about all over Europe. We have wonderful statements from the Venetian ambassadors that were very careful and exact in their reports, and they were describing magnificent festivals.
Was this a new development, that gardens could tell these stories?
Yes, it is a significant watershed in the history of gardening. There were political meanings in them. The gardens is part of a propaganda expanded program.
Well, what instigated that? What prompted it?
The Medici, and especially Cosimo, were the rulers of Florence, and they were keeping peace thanks to their power.
So people should support power, and in return they get peace.
That's, yes, more or less that's right. The meaning, the
So
deep meaning of it.
Yeah.
So the grand pageants were displays of Medici power, with the clear message that power equals peace and economic stability for the people of Florence, but only if they fell in line behind Medici rule. Boboli was private until the 19th century, when it was open to the public, but some parts are still out of bounds, like the Isolotto, an oval island made in the 1620s surrounded by a broad moat.
The public aren't allowed on this island, though I've been let in as a treat. It's clearly seen better days, but it's still rather wonderful, and it did have a different origin completely. It was a rabbit island. You keep rabbits and chickens on the island, perhaps there'll be an aviary as well, and it'd be protected by a moat of water, and in that you'd have fish, so you'd have plenty of dinner stored at the bottom of the garden. And then when they bought the obelisk and put that in the amphitheatre, they moved this, which was already there. So this is the original decoration. And you can see the enormity of the scale would have fitted into that space. Here, well, here it's very strange, isn't it? I tell you what I like about this. It does feel like the most extraordinary dramatic gesture to have at the bottom of the garden. Bit scrappy, feels a bit unloved, but it is an amazing piece of garden theatre.
The Medici dynasty ruled Florence for more than 3 centuries and were the greatest patrons of the Renaissance. They'd also been instrumental in establishing the concept that a garden could be a work of art, as well as playing an important role in confirming their wealth and power.